My wife publicly mocked my stamina at a barbecue, so I stopped carrying our marriage alone and forced her to see my invisible labor and real strength. Our marriage was built on mutual respect and understanding, or at least that's what I thought for. The first 4 or 5 years I took pride in being the foundation of our relationship, organizing our finances, maintaining our home, planning our future together. I didn't mind carrying the extra weight. I loved making sure everything ran smoothly. Last Saturday, that image shattered. During a casual neighborhood barbecue, everyone was enjoying the summer evening. Drinks flowing freely, laughter filling the air. I was grilling burgers when I overheard my wife's voice cutting through the noise. "Oh, he never lasts long enough," she announced loudly to our neighbors, her tone dripping with mockery. "His stamina is... well, let's just say I'm always left wanting more." The group erupted in laughter while I stood frozen, spatula in hand, cheeks burning as I realized what she was implying. This wasn't just a casual joke. It was deliberate humiliation in front of people we see every day. What hurt most wasn't the insinuation itself, but the striking contrast with reality. While she was busy crafting jokes at my expense, I had been the one waking up early to prepare breakfast, managing our investment portfolio, and handling household repairs. I was the one who remembered birthdays, planned vacations, and mediated conflicts with her family. It wasn't the first time she'd made such remarks, but something about this moment felt different. Perhaps the casual cruelty, or maybe the realization that my efforts had become so invisible to her that she could only see my perceived shortcomings. I finished grilling in silence, my mind racing as I served the food. I noticed how she barely acknowledged my presence, continuing her animated conversation as if I were merely background scenery. Our neighbors, still chuckling from her joke, avoided eye contact with me. That night, lying awake while she slept soundly beside me, I mentally listed everything I'd done in the past week. 3 loads of laundry, grocery shopping, fixing the leaky faucet, organizing our tax documents, scheduling her doctor's appointment. What had she contributed? Criticism and complaints. I realized then that our marriage had become profoundly unbalanced. I'd been carrying us both for so long that she'd forgotten how to walk alongside me. The weight I'd been shouldering had become expected, invisible, until it wasn't enough to satisfy her. Morning came, and with it, a decision. I wouldn't confront her about the joke. That would only lead to defensiveness or dismissal. Instead, I would show her exactly what she'd been taking for granted. It was time she understood what stamina really meant in our relationship. I made breakfast as usual, but as I placed her plate in front of her, I felt something shift inside me. This would be the last time I carried this marriage alone. From now on, she would learn what it truly means to be left wanting more. The days following the barbecue revealed a pattern I'd been blind to for years. Each morning, I watched her with new eyes as she scrolled through social media while I prepared her coffee. Exactly 1 sugar and a splash of almond milk. She'd barely look up to acknowledge me. "The lawn needs mowing," she mentioned casually before leaving for work. Not even a thank you for the breakfast I'd made. It was always statements like these, observations that somehow transformed into my responsibilities without discussion. I began noticing how often she diminished me in subtle ways. At dinner with her colleagues the following week, she interrupted my story about our recent home renovation project, which I had completed entirely by myself, to correct insignificant details before taking over the conversation. "He gets confused about the timeline," she said with an affectionate pat on my arm that felt more patronizing than loving. That night, I overheard her on the phone with her sister. "He's hopeless with planning anything," she laughed. "I have to manage everything important, or it falls apart." The irony was suffocating. Just that morning, I'd spent 2 hours researching investment options for our retirement fund while she slept in. I found myself reflecting on our financial arrangement. Despite earning roughly the same salary, I handled all the bills, mortgage payments, and savings allocations. She contributed her share, but I was the one who ensured everything was paid on time. When we needed new furniture or appliances, I researched options, compared prices, and arranged delivery. Yet somehow she believed she was the organized one. The breaking point came when I checked our neighborhood's community forum and discovered a thread from 3 months ago. Our next-door neighbor had posted about needing help with childcare, and my wife had responded, "My husband could help. He's basically useless around the house anyway. Might as well put him to work." 17 laughing reactions, 3 comments praising her humor. I sat at my desk staring at those words for what felt like hours. the casual disrespect, the public undermining of my worth. It wasn't just the barbecue, it was systematic, intentional. That evening, I declined a call from my mother-in-law about planning the family reunion, something I'd coordinated for the past 3 years. When my wife asked why I hadn't answered, I simply shrugged. I thought you might want to handle it this time. But you always do it, she replied, confusion evident in her voice. Exactly, I said quietly, turning back to my book. Her brow furrowed briefly before she reached for her phone, muttering about how it would probably be faster if she did it herself anyway. Little did she know, this was just the beginning of my gradual retreat from carrying our marriage alone. The next morning, I didn't make her coffee. A small change, barely noticeable, but the first step in showing her exactly what my stamina was worth. My plan unfolded gradually, almost imperceptibly at first. The small changes. No longer making her coffee, not picking up her dry cleaning, letting bill payment notifications sit unattended on my phone. These were just the beginning. I wasn't being petty. I was creating space for her to step up. She didn't notice immediately. The first week, she complained about the coffee machine being complicated when she had to make her own brew. I simply nodded and continued eating my breakfast. When she mentioned her dry cleaning wasn't ready for an important meeting, I expressed mild sympathy but offered no solution. Each small moment of my disengagement was met with confusion rather than understanding. The electricity bill is due tomorrow, she mentioned casually one evening, clearly expecting me to handle it as I always had. Yes, it is, I replied, not looking up from my laptop. A pause hung in the air. Aren't you going to pay it? I thought you might want it this month. The login information is in our password manager. Her expression shifted from confusion to irritation. But you always handle the bills. I don't even know how to access the account. The password manager has everything you need, I repeated calmly. I'm happy to show you how to log in, but I think it's important we both know how to manage our finances. She stormed off, muttering about my sudden attitude problem. Later that night, I heard her struggling with the payment portal, cursing under her breath. I resisted the urge to help. This was precisely the point. At work, I stopped adjusting my schedule to accommodate her needs. For years, I'd been the one leaving early to meet repairmen or taking half days when deliveries were expected. Now, when the plumber needed someone home on Tuesday, I simply said I couldn't make it. The mild panic in her eyes when she realized she'd have to rearrange her precious lunch meeting was both vindicating and saddening. The house began showing signs of my retreat. Laundry piled up. I washed only my own clothes. The refrigerator emptied without being magically restocked. Calendar notifications for friends' birthdays went unacknowledged. When her best friend texted asking why no gift had arrived, she shot me an accusatory glance. I thought you ordered something. No, I replied simply. I didn't. 3 weeks into my quiet revolution, we received an invitation to another neighborhood gathering. My stomach tightened at the memory of the last one, but I agreed to attend. This time would be different. This time, I wouldn't be silently carrying the burden of our social appearance. I didn't remind her to bring the dessert she'd promised. I didn't iron her favorite blouse or suggest accessories that would complement her outfit. I simply got myself ready and waited by the door. Where's the wine we're supposed to bring? She asked frantically, 10 minutes before we needed to leave. I don't know, I answered honestly. Did you buy some? The look of realization that crossed her face was almost worth the embarrassment of arriving empty-handed. Almost. That night, as we drove home in silence, I felt the weight of our changing dynamic. It wasn't comfortable for either of us, but it was necessary. The foundation was shifting, and soon she would have no choice but to notice just how much of our life together had been balanced on my shoulders alone. By the 4th week of my quiet rebellion, the cracks in our household were impossible to ignore. The turning point came when our internet was suddenly disconnected in the middle of her important video conference. I was reading in the living room when she stormed out of the home office, face flushed with anger and embarrassment. The internet is down. I'm in the middle of presenting to the entire department. Her accusation was implicit in her tone. I glanced up calmly. Did you pay the bill this month? I think it was due last week. The realization dawned on her face, followed quickly by indignation. That's your job. You always handle the utilities. I used to, I corrected gently. But I thought we were sharing responsibilities now. She stared at me, momentarily speechless, before rushing back to apologize to her colleagues using her phone's hotspot. I heard her frantic explanation about technical difficulties while scrambling to pay the bill online. It was restored within hours, but the damage to her professional image had been done. That evening, she confronted me directly for the first time. "What's going on with you lately? You're not acting like yourself." I put down my book. "Actually, I think I'm finally acting like myself. I'm just not acting like your assistant anymore." "My assistant?" Her voice rose with incredulity. "Is that how you see our marriage?" "How would you describe it?" I asked. "Because from where I stand, I've been handling nearly everything while you contribute criticism and jokes about my inadequacies." Her expression shifted between shock and defensiveness. "That's not fair. I work just as hard as you do." "At your job, yes. But in this marriage, when was the last time you scheduled a repair, researched our insurance options, or even remembered to buy groceries without me reminding you?" She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. The silence that followed was more honest than any words she might have offered. "And then there's the barbecue," I continued, my voice steady despite the emotion building in my chest. "You humiliated me in front of our neighbors, joking about my stamina while I've been carrying this marriage by myself." "It was just a joke," she protested weakly. "Was it?" "Because it felt like the culmination of years of disrespect, and I'm tired of it." The following days brought a palpable shift in our household dynamic. Bills arrived and remained unopened on the counter. The refrigerator contained only condiments and a wilting head of lettuce. The dirty laundry hamper overflowed onto the bathroom floor. I watched as she struggled to maintain her usual routine without my invisible support. One morning, she couldn't find a clean shirt for work and had to rush to an expensive boutique to buy something new. Another day, she missed an important deadline because no one had reminded her about it. The most revealing moment came when we received a text from her parents confirming they would arrive this weekend for their visit, a visit she had completely forgotten about. The panic that crossed her face as she realized the house was a mess, the guest room unprepared, and no meals planned was almost painful to witness. "Why didn't you remind me they were coming?" she demanded. "Why would that be my responsibility?" I countered. That night, I found her sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by bills, calendar notifications, and to-do lists, her expression one of overwhelmed defeat. For a moment, I almost stepped in to help. The habit of 5 years is hard to break. But I knew this was necessary. This was the only way she would truly understand. She looked up at me, dark circles forming under her eyes. "I didn't realize," she began, then trailed off. "Didn't realize what?" I prompted. "How much you actually do. Have always done." Her voice was small, lacking its usual confidence. It wasn't an apology, but it was a start, the beginning of awareness. And as I watched her struggle with the reality of our unbalanced marriage, I realized this was the first time in years she was seeing me, really seeing me, and the invisible labor I had provided without recognition or thanks. The weekend with her parents was a masterclass in consequences. I watched from the sidelines as she frantically attempted to prepare for their arrival, cleaning, shopping, cooking. All tasks she'd previously considered beneath notice when I handled them. By the time they arrived Friday evening, she looked utterly exhausted. Her normally perfectly styled hair was hastily pulled back. Dark circles were prominent under her eyes. The guest room was presentable but lacking the thoughtful touches I would have added. Fresh flowers, their favorite magazines, the special pillows her mother preferred for her neck pain. Dinner was delayed and slightly overcooked. The conversation felt stilted without my usual social buffer. I'd always been the one keeping discussions flowing, remembering to ask about her father's golf game or her mother's book club. Now I participated politely but minimally. Her mother noticed immediately. "Is everything all right between you two?" she asked during a moment alone in the kitchen. I simply smiled and mentioned we were adjusting some dynamics in our relationship. The most revealing moment came when her father asked about our retirement planning, something I'd meticulously managed for years. When the question was directed at her, she froze momentarily before fumbling through a vague response. The look she shot me was equal parts resentment and panic. "Perhaps you should ask him," she finally said. "He handles all of that." "Actually," I interjected calmly, "we've been transitioning to shared management of our finances. I'm sure she can fill you in on the details of our portfolio." The silence that followed was deafening. After her parents left Sunday afternoon, she collapsed onto the couch, physically and emotionally drained. "That was horrible," she admitted quietly. I sat across from her, waiting, They definitely noticed something was wrong, she continued. Mom kept asking me if we were having problems. Are we? I asked simply. She looked at me. Really looked at me. Perhaps for the first time in years. I don't know. Are we? Before I could respond, her phone chimed. She glanced down, and her expression fell. It's from next door. They're having an impromptu gathering tonight. The same neighbor from the barbecue. The color drained from her face as the memory of her joke clearly flashed through her mind. For a moment, I felt a twinge of satisfaction at her discomfort, followed immediately by shame at my pettiness. Are we going? She asked hesitantly. Do you want to? Not really, she admitted, but we should probably make an appearance. The neighbor gathering was smaller than the barbecue, just 3 couples plus us. I noticed immediately how she stayed close to me, none of her usual social butterfly behavior in evidence. When someone asked about our recent home renovations, she deferred to me instead of talking over me. Then came the moment I hadn't anticipated. Our neighbor, glass of wine in hand, grinned at my wife. So, has his stamina improved since the last barbecue? He asked with a wink. The entire group fell silent. My wife's face flushed deeply, and for a second I thought she might cry. Instead, she straightened her shoulders. Actually, she said, her voice uncharacteristically humble, I've been learning a lot about stamina lately. Turns out, I've been taking his for granted for a very long time. The neighbor looked confused, clearly expecting a different response. My wife continued. He's been carrying so much more than I realized. I'm the one who needs to work on my stamina. She reached for my hand then, a gesture that surprised me with its sincerity. The conversation awkwardly shifted to other topics, but something fundamental had changed between us. On the short walk home, neither of us spoke. The night air was cool, filled with the sound of crickets and distant laughter. When we reached our driveway, she stopped. I'm sorry, she said simply, her voice catching slightly. I really am. It wasn't enough. Not yet. But it was a beginning. The first genuine acknowledgement of the imbalance that had defined our marriage for years. The following week brought a strange new tension to our household. Not the familiar friction of resentment, but the awkward uncertainty of a relationship in transition. Her apology hung between us, acknowledged but not yet fully processed. I continued my policy of handling only my share of responsibilities, but found myself watching her more closely, noting each fumbling attempt to fill the gaps I'd left. One evening I came home to find her surrounded by papers at the dining table, hair disheveled, glasses perched on her nose. She looked up at me with exhaustion evident in her eyes. I've been trying to organize our insurance policies, she explained. I had no idea we had so many different accounts, or that they needed to be reviewed annually. I nodded, setting down my keys. I usually spend about 8 hours each quarter making sure everything's optimized and up to date. She stared at me, something like wonder and shame crossing her features. 8 hours every 3 months, and I never even noticed. That's just the insurance, I replied quietly. There's also the investment portfolio, retirement planning, property taxes, home maintenance schedules. Stop, she whispered, raising her hand. Just stop. I get it. She pushed her chair back from the table and stood. Can we talk? Really talk? We moved to the living room, sitting on opposite ends of the couch. Close enough for intimacy, but with space that acknowledged our current distance. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I've been thinking about what you said, she finally began, about carrying this marriage alone. At first I was angry. It felt like an accusation, an exaggeration. She took a deep breath. But these past few weeks have been illuminating. I keep discovering things you used to handle that I didn't even know needed handling. It's like I've been living in a house without seeing the foundation. She looked down at her hands. And then, to make jokes about your performance when I wasn't carrying my weight at all. Why did you? I asked, the question that had haunted me since the barbecue. Why make that joke? She was quiet for a long moment. I think I was trying to establish some kind of superiority, to feel like I had power in our relationship when subconsciously I knew you were the one holding everything together. Her voice became smaller. It's easier to mock someone than to acknowledge how much you depend on them. The honesty of her response caught me off guard. I'd expected defensiveness, deflection, or minimization, not this raw self-awareness. I don't want a divorce, she continued, but I also don't want to continue like this. I don't like who I've become in this marriage, and I hate that I've taken you for granted. I don't want to divorce either, I admitted, but I can't go back to being the only one investing in our life together. I don't want you to, she said firmly. I want us to be partners, real partners. She reached tentatively across the couch, not quite touching me. I want to learn all the things you've been handling. I want to carry my share. It's not just about dividing tasks, I explained. It's about respect, recognition, not making me the butt of jokes to elevate yourself. I know, she whispered, and I'm truly sorry. That stops now, all of it. The disrespect, the taking you for granted, the public undermining. She finally reached for my hand, and after a moment's hesitation, I let her take it. I want to be worthy of you. We talked late into the night, mapping out a new framework for our marriage, one built on genuine partnership and mutual respect. We created shared calendars, established regular financial reviews, and divided household responsibilities. More importantly, we committed to weekly check-ins about our relationship itself. The change wasn't immediate or perfect. There were moments of backsliding, times when she expected me to automatically handle something or when I felt the familiar resentment rising. But slowly, steadily, our marriage transformed. 2 months later, we hosted our own barbecue. As I stood at the grill, I overheard her talking to the same neighbor who had witnessed her previous joke. You know, she said loud enough for me to hear, I never properly appreciated his stamina until recently. Turns out he's been carrying both of us for years, and I'm still playing catch-up. Our eyes met across the yard, and in that moment, I knew we would be okay. Not because she had publicly affirmed me, though that was healing, but because we were finally truly sharing the weight of our life together. And there was an unexpected strength in that balance that neither of us had experienced before. Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, thank you for reading. I hope it resonated with someone who needed to hear it. See you in the next one.